Today on Commander Replay, we check out this GoFundMe submitted Marchesa of the Black Rose deck. Is Marchesa strong enough to dethrone Oloro, Feather, and Pramikon? Find out next on Commander Replay. I want to thank my awesome Patreon supporters. We have one new Patreon supporter in Danny Nolan. Danny, you are awesome. If you want to help support the channel and vote on which decks I play next, or if you just want to get some high quality games of MTGO, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below. Welcome back, everyone. Playing some Marchesa the Black Rose today, and today's deck list comes to us from GoFundMe donor Michael Gordon, who's been a longtime supporter of the show, so thank you to Michael for the donation and sending us this lovely Marchesa deck list. Taking a look at this opening hand, I took a look at the deck before the game. There's like every signet and talisman in the deck. We have 0 in this hand, which tells me that ramp is very important. So I think I'm going to mulligan this hand and see if we can find something that's got a little more ramp to it. I'm liking this a little bit better, and at least in terms of the ramp. The other hand had a lot of gas with Vampiric Tutor and stuff like that. But I think we'll go ahead and keep this one right here. I do like 3 lands a lot better versus the 2. The last one only had 2 lands, no ramp. So, you know. Bit of a trade-off right there, but I think this is where we want to be. And opponent lays down a turn 1 mana crypt. Yep, they off to the races. And it's a good thing we found something with a little bit of ramp in it, so that way we don't have to be so far behind. So that'll bring it to our turn 1. We draw a Phyrexian Altar. Play this command tower right here, and not much going on, so we're just going to tap out and pass. So this deck should be a bit on the stronger side. I don't have a lot of experience with Marchesa, so I don't know exactly all of the little inner workings of the deck. But it had a decent number of counter spells. The curve was fairly low. It did have some 6 and 7 drops, but it also had a ton of ramp to support them, so I can get down with that. And opponent F6 their turn accidentally, so they will be a turn behind. Not a good place to be. We draw into a Meteor Golem. So let's play a Swamp, play a Signet, and we'll pass the turn like that. So taking a look at what Marchesa does, this is an older one, but it's 1 in Grixis for a 3/3 with Dethrone. Whenever this creature attacks the player with the most life or tied for the most life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Other creatures you control have Dethrone. And then whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So there's a lot of very combo-y things that you can do with this deck. She sort of grants board wipe protection when things have +1/+1 counters on them, which is pretty good. The creator of this deck said that it started out as just kind of a value deck, but it ended up taking so much hate that they had to power it up a little bit just because of all the removal that would get fired their way. People do tend to get a bit scared of Marchesa, and I'm no exception. I have seen some of the more high-powered builds over the years. It's been a while. I haven't seen any recently, so I don't know. Like I said, I don't know every little interaction that's going on, but I know that it can just be very strong, and it can be very combo-centric. And we do have some of that today. There are some infinites in here. Hopefully I can execute them properly when they come up, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, that brings it to our turn 3. We draw into a Blood Crypt. I guess we play the Fiery Islet and cast our commander? Yeah, I think just cast our commander. And we'll lose a bit of life to the Horizon land. Opponent's going to Enlighten Tutor. Did they not get anything? They're going to lay down a Firebrand Archer. Before the game, opponent said that they're still new to the Magic UI and that they've been having some trouble with it, and it is showing a bit right here. Because Enlightened Tutor could have at least gotten them a Soul Ring and got them caught up just a little bit. Here comes a Smothering Tithe for the Oloro. Yeah, that seems good. So Smothering Tithe trigger on the Pramikon, and they're going to pay for it. Ghostly Prison coming down, and that'll bring it back to our turn. There's a Smothering Tithe trigger. We're not going to pay. We draw into a Damnation, play this Blood Crypt, untapped, get the Talisman. We'll attack Oloro since they are on the throne. So Marchesa will dethrone. We're going to send her to the graveyard just in case she should die for any reason. This opponent goes down to 42 for Commander. I guess we play the Phyrexian Altar right here, and we'll pass like that. Firebrand Archer are going to swing into the Oloro. They go down to 40. Comes a Vampiric Tutor for the Oloro at the end step. Here comes Solemn Simulacrum. Opponent's going to get a land. Hoping we catch a land off the top. If we do, we can play Meteor Golem and blow up the Smothering Tithe, and I think that would be a pretty good idea. Smothering Tithe trigger on the Pramikon, and they're going to continue to pay for it. They do lay down, they do have a Core Haven in place, so they can prevent damage, which is pretty relevant. Here comes a Rhystic Study. Ooh, we draw a Deathrender. Nice. Haven't seen Deathrender in forever. You can put Deathrender on our commander and then sack it, get the Meteor Golem, and they should all come back. I think I like that. I'm not going to pay for the Smothering Tithe. Get Deathrender, not paying for the heuristic study. I used to play a Deathrender deck in Casual Extended a long time ago, and it was super fun. One of the best things you could put it on was like Sakura Tribe Elder, because you could just sack it immediately, and then you get Kakushos, and who's the dragon that does 5 damage when he comes in? Bogardan Hellkite, is that right? Was a lot of fun. Not paying for the heuristic study. Smothering Tithe will trigger. Yeah, heuristic Smothering Tithe seems pretty good. Opponent pays for the Smothering Tithe right there. Let's equip the Deathrender. Opponent's going to Pongify our creature. No. Well, it'll still come back at the end step. So we get an ape. The equip fizzles. And we'll pass turn like that. Marchesa coming back. And with that, we're going to, next time we get priority, we're going to switch it back to not the graveyard. Smothering Tithe trigger on Feather. Taking a look at what our opponents are playing today. First up, we have Eldgrim piloting Feather the Redeemed, struggling with the UI a little bit. They got a Firebrand Archer in play. Looks like it might be one of the more spell-slingery Feather builds, so we'll see what's going on. They're going to lay down Krenko, 10th Street Kingpin. Interesting, I haven't seen that one in Feather builds before, so we'll see what's going on there. Heuristic Study will trigger. Next up, we have Bright New Era, a newer Patreon supporter, piloting Oloro Ageless Ascetic, and they've got some things going on with Smothering Tithe and a little bit of blocking with Psalm Simulacrum right there. Got a lot of extra mana, which makes me not super happy. Oloro, just always a tough customer, gains so much life. In our case, we do have some ability to get there with commander damage with some of these equipments, so that's a thing that I'm going to consider pretty heavily. We've also got some combos in here. Once they show up, then that might be a thing as well. But yeah, Oloro, a lot of times, like, heavy life gain, heavy Esper control, and usually just going to slow the game down is usually their game plan. So, and these days, if you're playing a stronger Oloro deck, you're probably looking at the Exquisite Blood, Sanguine Bond combo in terms of win conditions. Here comes Oloro into play. There's one you don't see that much of. No one ever actually plays their Oloro. They just leave it in the command zone and gain 1,000,000 life all game. And then finally, we have Chaotix 2075 piloting Pramikon Sky Rampart, a really fun commander. However, I think maybe not the best one for this particular matchup, just because I think our deck is a little bit more combo-centric, and Oloro probably not going to be doing so much attacking. Feather might be doing some. But Pramikon, probably a commander you really want in a more combat-centric meta, and not so much in a combo-centric one. Here comes a Heart of Kiran for the Pramikon. Sweet. Wonder what Chaotix is up to today. Don't usually see a lot of Heart of Kiran in Commander. Was an MVP in Standard, though. Here comes Jace Unraveler of Secrets. Super Friends, maybe? That could be a thing. Jace is going to scry one, then draw a card. Yep. It's going to be back to our turn. Smothering Tithe trigger on us. What are we actually doing this turn? We do draw a land. That puts us up to 7 mana, which means we could hardcast either Meteor Golem or Sphinx of Vuthun. But I'll probably do the sword thing. The sword only costs 2. I think I'm actually going to pay for this right here. Play the land. Equip Deathrender to our commander. If we attack, these will both dethrone, and this one will become a 4/4. That would just get blocked by Oloro. I don't know if that's doing so much for us. So we're going to swing into Oloro because of our dethrone mechanic, in all likelihood block with Psalm Simulacrum. They may even double block here, to be completely honest. So we get the dethrone, we get a counter on it, send it back to the graveyard should it die. Gonna block with the Psalm Simulacrum. Yep, and that's all. Chumping all that damage. They'll get to draw a card. And then I think we sacrifice our commander to the Phyrexian altar. Deathrender will trigger, and Marchesa will trigger, so it'll come back at the end step. Use the Deathrender ability, get Meteor Golem. I'm going to go for the Smothering Tithe first, but I am hoping this thing sticks around for a little bit, so that we can Blade of Selves next turn. I'm not sure if I want to show the Blade of Selves yet. I kind of don't. Yeah, I really don't, because if we do that, then opponents are really going to take interest in what we're doing, and I'm not super down for that. Should something happen to this Meteor Golem, we could instant speed sack to the altar and then get Sphinx of Vuthun into play, and that doesn't sound like the worst idea either. But I think we're just going to pass like that, and our commander comes back to play, and we'll change the zones before we move on. So Smothering Tithe down. Next one I'm looking at is probably going to be Rhystic Study, followed by Ghostly Prison. Jace may be a thing that we need to deal with at some point as well. Here comes a Steel Shaper's Gift for opponent, and that'll trigger the Firebrand Archer and the Rhystic Study. Opponent gets themselves a Skull Clamp. Yeah, Skull Clamp's pretty good. Firebrand Archer will trigger once again, Rhystic Study will trigger once again. So maybe more of a token-based build with Krenko? I'm not sure. Not entirely sure what to expect right here. So if you put like a Brute Force on Krenko and attacked with it, you'd get a handful of tokens. Doesn't seem awful in a Feather deck, especially if you're in a token focus. Opponent's going to equip their Skull Clamp to the Firebrand Archer. Firebrand Archer goes down. They'll get to draw 2 cards. Opponent said they were going to attack, but they forgot about the prison. Yeah, Ghostly Prison is a card. Opponent gets a land out of the deal, plays a Temple of Triumph, will get a Scry. Oloro still gaining some life, keeping themselves on the throne, and now they can draw cards if they want to. And they do. So they go up to 7, drop a land. And they pass with all their mana open. They do have 7 mana. This is so a Cyclonic Rift. This is 100% a Cyclonic Rift. Ideally, I'd like to catch something that puts +1/+1 counters on things off the top. That would be a good place to be right now. Here comes Norn's Annex for the Pramikon, so all of the Pillow Fort. Then Jace is going to draw a card. Scry and draw. The ultimate is 8. You get an emblem with whenever opponents cast their first spell each turn, counter it. Well, we might want to do something about that. Ooh, I forgot. Ghostly Prison does not protect Planeswalkers. I always forget about that. Norn's Annex does, however, so we'll probably have to pay some life for that one. Everwatching Threshold. Whenever opponent attacks, if they attacked you and or a Planeswalker you control, draw a card. Yeah, well, probably going to have to do that now. So, I mean, if, like, we tap out and try to go for this big Blade of Selves play right here, opponent's just going to wreck us. But if they don't have it, this is a terrible spot to be. I would love to see a counterspell off the top would also be huge. It's a Clone Shell. Enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile 1 face down, put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. When it dies, turn the exile card face up. If it's a creature, put it onto the battlefield. That's a lot of text. It's a lot of text. So I think I get a creature, and then when it dies, we get a creature onto the battlefield. So, I mean, I think we just need to try it. I guess Meteor Golem into Jace? But we don't get the thing. I guess the question is, how likely is it that we get bounced? Probably very likely. Probably could have moved the sword first, but, just send everything at the Jace. No Marchesa, I guess. So we're going to pay some Phyrexian life to attack. Everwatching Threshold will trigger. Oh, we don't have to pay for the Ghostly Prison. That's good news. Yep, opponent's going to accrue the Heart of Kiran. Yeah, probably should have moved the Deathrender over. Opponent can't decide which one to block. Opponent's going to block the token. So, Jace down to 1 loyalty. Keep them off their ultimate. Let's move the Deathrender over to Marchesa, because there's a chance that I end step, sack the Sphinx, and do some stuff like that. Move the Deathrender. We've got the mana for this Clone Shell. Might as well. Rhystic Study will trigger. Yep. Can't pay for it. Clone Shell coming in. We'll get to exile and do the thing. Weird card. All right, let's read this again. We don't have any creatures under here. And actually, a lot of stuff that I wanted under there. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile one of them face down, put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. When it dies, turn the exile card face up. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield. So I guess no creatures, which means we just exile this Bloodstained Mire. But I did actually, these are 3 cards that I really wanted, so that hurts. That hurts. A Clone Shell may not be the best inclusion in this deck. Let's take a look at how many creatures are in the deck. Ooh, 21? Yeah. 21, I probably wouldn't run the Clone Shell, unless there's some combo that I'm not aware of or something like that that makes it really good. Ugh. It's a pretty low creature count, and I think you're going to whiff a lot of the time with this thing. I think there's just more efficient ways to cheat creatures in, like, just running a Mana Vault or something is probably going to be more effective than that. Opponent's going to put the Skull Clamp on their Krenko. Yep, it's got 2 power. It's going to swing into the Oloro, sure. So it's going to make some tokens. And if opponent blocks, they will draw some cards, so trying to get their card draw going. The Krenko goes up to 3 power after the counter, so 3 goblins. Opponent's going to block. Ooh, opponent's going to double strike the goblin. Rhystic Study will trigger. Opponent's going to Chain of Vapor, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Oh, I hate that card. So they're going to bounce the Krenko, but the Krenko did get to make some goblins. And I think that's the relevant portion of things happening right there. So just keep feeding things to the Skull Clamp, and things should start to shape up for them. So Krenko getting bounced. Chain of Vapor, Rhystic Study. Opponent's going to Skull Clamp a token, sure. Draws 2 cards. Gonna Skull Clamp another token, trying to go all the way up. Didn't find what they were looking for the first time. Oh, they do have a Reliquary Tower. Okay. So they won't have to discard. Yeah, why not? Just draw all the cards. Why not? They go up to 10 cards in hand. Sounds good to me. No max hand size. That'll bring it back to Oloro's turn. They continue to keep gaining life. We did not see the Cyclonic Rift right there, so we played around it unnecessarily, which makes me a little bit sad, but we'll see what they do right here. See if they're just going to keep passing with all their mana open and annoying the bejesus out of us doing so. Here comes Rest in Peace, the Graveyard. Oh, hey now. That does some relevant things. That makes it so our commander doesn't really do a whole lot. Yeah, that's definitely bad news. Deathrender is not going to work because creatures can't die. So coming in, graveyard's getting exiled. Yep, here comes Exquisite Blood. Okay, yep, that one is a problem. But at least opponent has tapped out, so now we can do some stuff. Now we can do the big Blade of Selves play, and there are some things that we need to get rid of. Now, as far as I knew, Blade of Selves was still bugged, so it's going to be a little weird. There was a bug where the tokens weren't disappearing at the end of the turn, and that causes a bit of issues. But I guess we have the Phyrexian Altar, so we could sack them and sort of correct the game if we need to do that. Mana Crypt flip for the Pramikon. Pramikon's at 25. I don't remember attacking them. Is it all the Mana Crypt? I know we attacked their Planeswalker, but I don't really remember sending much damage their way. An Exquisite Blood will trigger. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. Ooh, yeah, that's bad. And Oloro gains life so they can draw a card if they have mana. They do not have mana. Chaotic's up to a casual 12 cards in hand. Here comes Blind Obedience. Oh, boy. Really start slowing things down now. We'll get them life gain, too. With 12 cards in hand, they can do some stuff. Good news is that when you have 12 cards in hand, you feel compelled to use them all, so you don't have to discard the hand size, which means they'll probably tap out most of their mana. Saheeli Sublime Artificer. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 servo token. And the -2, target artifact you control becomes a copy of another target artifact or creature you control until the end of turn, except it's an artifact. Okay. Got some triggers firing off right there. Oh, that's a Time Twister. No. No, not Time Twister. We need our Blade of Selves. Our Sphinx. Well, we'll get some new cards, but hopefully a tutor? Okay, there's a Diabolic Intent. That's a tutor. A River Kelpie plus Sack Outlet is infinite, I believe? Or do we need one more piece? Oh, Spark Double in any persist creature. Okay, we draw an Opal Palace. That one's pretty good, actually. To get the Reflecting Pool into play. Have exactly 8 mana. That's exactly enough to use this Diabolic Intent. Get our Blade of Selves and do that whole thing. Everyone's tapped out, so I think we're going for it. We need to sacrifice a creature. Sacrifice this Clone Shell. It'll go into exile. Rhystic Study will trigger. Opponent will get to draw. Get Blade of Selves. Cast Blade of Selves. Opponent will get another draw. Blade of Selves comes in tapped. Equip the Blade of Selves to the Meteor Golem. Exquisite Blood will trigger one time. So Blade of Selves on the Meteor Golem. Send both into Oloro. Myriad will trigger. Dethrone will trigger. Here comes the Myriad. So put one in against Chaotix and one in against Eldegrim. So we get 2 Meteor Golem triggers, and if we time this right, put the bottom one on the Rest in Peace, and then the top one on the Exquisite Blood, which should exile the Exquisite Blood. So Exquisite Blood down, goes into exile. Rest in Peace down, we can use our graveyard once again. So we're going to switch the zone right here. Opponent's going to block our Meteor Golem. It does have a +1 counter on it, so it should come back. Opponent will chump block the Myriad token with a Servo token. Sure. So Meteor Golem dies, and Marchesa ability will trigger. 4 damage on the Oloro. Doesn't look like we have an extra one that we can pull out from anywhere. And, yep, the tokens don't exile like they're supposed to, so we'll just sacrifice those. And if we need to for any reason, we can sacrifice our commander and get the River Kelpie, which we may do at end step somewhere, if nothing else should come up. The other thing we can do, too, we could potentially sacrifice the Meteor Golem, and actually we could sacrifice our Marchesa, get a River Kelpie, sacrifice the River Kelpie, and we'd be drawing cards, and also we'd be able to counter-squall something if we need to. So Meteor Golem will come back in, and now I think we're going to go for this Rhystic Study. This thing's just been a huge pain. I'm drawing so many cards with that, so let's finally get rid of that one. So Rhystic Study finally down. Chaotic says, destroyed before turn 13 this time. Yeah, it's only turn 8. They've only had it for, what, I don't know, 4 or 5 turns. They've done some pretty good card drawing with it, so. Here comes Feather into play. Yep. Finally making an appearance. Surprisingly, no board wipes yet. We have one in our hand, but not a ton of creatures, and it doesn't really make sense to use it at this point. Opponent going to swing our way with a token. Yep, that's going to get us. Down to 24 we go. And opponent's going to Skull Clamp the token. Draw some cards. Here comes an Electrostatic Field for the Feather. And with Chaotix and our life total bleeding down a little bit, it's potentially not the best for us. If they untap with a bunch of 1-mana instants in their hand, they could do a lot of damage. And Oloro just keeps continuing to gain more and more life. They're still at 45. We've been swinging away at them all game, and at least we've got 10 commander on them, but it's becoming an issue. Down to 23 we go. Is there a life drain in there too? Yep. I forgot that it also drains opponents. Yeah, Oloro just does too much. Too many abilities. Signet coming in for our opponent. Comes in tapped. I didn't see what they spent all their mana on. What did they spend all their mana on? Here comes the Swords to Plowshares. Yep, that's not ideal. I think we try to save the Meteor Golem right here. So I'm thinking Counter Squall. So let's do that whole Counter Squall thing. Send this to the graveyard. Okay. Sacrifice for a blue. Deathrender will trigger. Marchesa will get a trigger. Use the Deathrender. Bring in the River Kelpie. Deathrender will get attached to it. Use the Phyrexian Altar. Sacrifice the River Kelpie. It will persist. We should draw a card right here. It comes back in. We draw a card. It's got a minus counter on it. We'll draw a card. Ooh, it's Volrath Stronghold. Excellent. We'll counter squall the swords. And Volrath Stronghold means that... Actually, we don't even need to use a counter squall now. We could literally just sack it and then get it back with Volrath. Although it's easier to just have it in play. So, but if opponent has follow-up answers right here, then we can do the Volrath thing. Then they're going to overload a Cyclonic Rift. Well... Wish I saved that counter squall. Does it make sense to sack anything? Guess not. Guess we just let everything get bounced. So everything coming back to our hand. That's going to slow us down a ton. Ooh! Everything's back in our hand. We can use the Deathrender. Get the Meteor Golem back. Yeah, get wrecked. Get wrecked. Alright, what are we blowing up? Blind Obedience is pretty heinous. This Saheeli's getting pretty annoying. We're tight on mana, so I think the Ghostly Prison. That worked out really well. Deathrender, super, super sweet. Maybe I need to build a Deathrender deck somewhere. Maybe that's a thing that needs to happen. Ooh, this would be really good with Gerard, I think. Oh, hey now. Opponent says mistakes were made. Opponent gonna play Oath of Gideon, get themselves some tokens. And opponent gonna crew up the Heart of Kira and send it our way. Yep. It's not ideal. We do not have much in the way of blocking. Down to 19 we go, but Marchesa does come back at the end step, so that's something. Oh, opponent's got a lot of tokens now. That's like a thing, actually. Ooh, that's an All Is Dust. Okay. Maybe we're on the All Is Dust plan. So, dethrone right here. Send these in. Yeah, we're definitely on the All Is Dust plan. Okay. Get this Volrath Stronghold into play before something untoward happens. Swing into Oloro. Get the dethrone triggers. Puts him down to 37-14 commander damage. Still on the throne, but slowly getting there. Now, all these tokens are colorless. Well, some of the tokens are colorless. Okay. But yeah, I think we're just still on All Is Dust. I don't think there's any way we can't All Is Dust right here. So, unless... You want what we can do? All right. We can go Signet. Everyone else is going to cough their creatures out over the next turn. We could go Damnation right here and then All Is Dust next turn. And I think I like that plan. We can also go Feast on the Fallen, which will get us a counter back on some of our creatures, which means we can have sack outlets up again, which I think is a good idea. Won't be able to get any signets out of our hand, though, if we do that, though. So, but I think it's still worth it. Play Damnation. Get rid of all the creatures. Get the Marchesa triggers. Let's get Feast on the Fallen right here. Whew, losing more life. I think we need a little life gain in this deck. Have our creatures come back. Meteor Golem on anything colorless. The Mana Crypt is colorless. Anything that's a really big problem. Blind Obedience is bad against our signets. Yeah, maybe we just blow up Blind Obedience. So Blind Obedience down. And we'll pass like that. Need to discard to hand size. Don't want to get rid of the lands. Think I'm going to get rid of a Talisman. We'll get rid of a fetch land. Our life's getting low. Fetching for lands is not where we want to be right now. So now that everyone's been bounced, we wait for everyone to cough all their stuff back out, then All Is Dust. I don't think we got the Feast on the Fallen trigger, though. At the beginning of each upkeep, if an opponent lost life last turn, which they did, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Seems like a missed trigger. Here comes Feather back to play. Yep. And here comes that Electrostatic Field. Yep. I think everyone except Chaotix has missed a fair number of land drops this game. Everyone seems to be a bit behind, so... getting hit with a Rift and not having all your lands in play is not ideal. Here comes a Signet. Yep. Here comes another Signet. Yep. Here comes a Supreme Verdict. Well, yep. Think our stuff is finally going down. Send Marchesa to the command zone, and Meteor Golem will... Well, if we're going to All Is Dust... Well, I guess we shouldn't have Feasted the Fallen last turn if we're going to All Is Dust. That was a waste. Opponent's going to Sheltering Light on their Feather, so they'll have a Feather. It'll gain Indestructible. And they'll get to scry one time. Electrostatic Field will trigger. And one thing I'm worried about now, well, I guess we got rid of the Blind Obedience, but Electrostatic Field and Blind Obedience, stuff like that, Incidental Life Loss, even Oloro, that stuff's really going to pile up against us. So down our stuff goes. Ooh, there's a Grand Abolisher. Yeah, that's a nasty one. Here comes a Will Kenrith. That's a good one. And that'll get a partner trigger. Opponent's going to scry and draw with the Jace. Yep. They do have Negate mana open, but I don't know. Don't feel like they have it, but we'll see. And they're going to use the Will Kenrith ability on Feather. Yup. Here comes a Fabricate. It's going to bring it back to our turn. There's a Watery Grave. Let's play the Opal Palace. play the Signet, play All Is Dust. I really like these type of board wipes right here. The things that hit like almost everything. Hour of Revelation, All Is Dust, Ugin, Planar Cleansing. Because this is a lot of enchantments. Grixis does not deal with enchantments and planeswalkers particularly well. Other than maybe like a Cyclonic Rift. All Is Dust just fixed a lot of our problems. So really, really like those super universal board wipes. Oblivion Stone, another one that probably doesn't get run enough. I know it's a little bit expensive in paper, but yeah. Whew. Cleaning out the Pramikon. We just got so many permanents of theirs. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 permanents we destroyed. That is massive, in addition to other stuff that we hit from other opponents. That is so, so good. And now there's kind of an open board. Feather, even though they had some struggles early in the game, they drew a ton of cards. They still have 9 cards in hand. I mean, there's a world in which they could get back into this, quite honestly. Here comes Feather back to play. Here comes an Expedite. It's going to have haste. Let's see where they want to point it. Also going to draw a card. Going over to the Pramikon. Cool, not us. All about that. So they take a hit for 3, go down to 18, 3 Commander. And they'll get their Expedite back. That's a good thing to keep in mind, because if they lay down like a Sun Titan or something like that, that could do a lot of damage. You haste it out there and start getting wild with it. Here comes Oloro back to play. Yep. Pramikon still, you know, they've just got more lands than everyone. They still got 6 cards. I just feel like there's a lot you can do with that. We should take a look at some lands, these utility lands too. Mobilized District becomes a 3/3. Okay, they can turn it into a creature. Here comes a Rowan. Yep, Karn's Bastion, they can proliferate. They've still got some Pillow Fort left with the Core Haven. Yeah, they just got stuff. Probably need to keep using the Meteor Golem on them, honestly. Oh, non-land? Non-land. All right, so we can't hit some of the nastier lands. Can't hit the Rowan, though. That may not be the worst idea I've ever seen. Opponent's going to force us to attack. We don't have any creatures, so no big deal there. Just plussing the Rowan. And here comes Elixir of Immortality. Yep. I would sign up for that life gain right now. Oh, that's a Wheel of Fortune. All right, well, our hand will almost certainly get worse. Blade of Selves, Deathrender, Sack Outlet. That was pretty good. Those were things that we wanted. Opponent's going to Sheltering Light on their Feather. Ooh, yeah, that's going to hit Feather pretty hard. They've been drawing cards like crazy. So they're going to save their Sheltering Light. They could save their Expedite if they want. Yep, going to save the Expedite also. Like, the thing that I'm worried about right here is just drawing, like, lands and ramp. That would be exactly what we don't need. And things will get pretty rough if that's what happens. Yep, there's 4 lands, a piece of ramp, and an Altar of Dementia. Oh, boy. Potentially some card draw in this Blood Tracker, but, ugh. Yep, Wheel of Fortune, so disruptive. So disruptive. Yep, opponent had the Sun Titan in hand, just like I was talking about. Had that guy, can return some stuff. Nahiri, decent. Orm's Thunder, Path, Skull Clamp down. Opponent had Deputy of Detention. Enters battlefield, exile target non-land permanent with the same name until it leaves the battlefield. We do have a new Sack Outlet, so that's not the worst thing imaginable, but I was really hoping to get wild with the Deathrender, the River Kelpie, and all that sort of stuff. Maybe we put the River Kelpie back on top, is kind of what I'm thinking. Do we want the River Kelpie? If we play the River Kelpie, we could persist at one time, and that gets us a card draw, and that's not the worst place to be. Probably better than just our natural draw, I would think. Yeah, okay, I think we're getting that back. Yeah, let's get the River Kelpie. Draw the River Kelpie. Play a land. Play the Soul Ring. Let's get River Kelpie in. Get the Talisman. Lose another life. Ooh, life's getting down there. Gotta find that life gain. And then finally get the Altar. 21 creatures in our deck. I'm not feeling super incentivized to self-mill that much. Flayer of the Hatebound is one of them, though. Could hit a Runescar Demon, Butcher of Malakir. Any real life gain in this deck? Kakusho. There's a Kakusho somewhere in this deck. That is the card that we need like there is no tomorrow. So we got more lands, more ramp. We don't have a lot of gas left, so that's maybe not the best. Maybe we do self-mill and just try to hit one of our tutors, because if we can tutor into Kakusho, we can get some life back and kind of sustain ourselves into this game a while longer. Here comes a Boros Signet. Yep. Here comes a Primal Amulet. There's a Reckless Rage going to... Actually, I think if we fizzle the target? What happens if we fizzle the target? I'm not sure right here. We're going to use the Altar of Dementia, mill ourselves a bit, sacrifice the River Kelpie, see if this fizzles the Reckless Rage. I'm not sure if it will. It will persist. It comes back. We get to draw a card. Ooh, it's a Vampiric Tutor. That's the card we need. Well, so far this plan's looking like it's working out. We lose Goblin Bombardment. It's useful, but Mystic Remora. Yeah, decent cards, things that we could have used. But I probably don't need to self-mill anymore now that we've got the Vampiric Tutor. We can get Kakusho. We can probably get some other win condition too, honestly. See if this fizzles. No, nope, it still goes into exile. Never mind. Oh, they get the Reckless Rage back. That makes me sad. That makes me sad. Let's take a look through the deck list. We could get an infinite combo. That's a thing that we could do. What's the one that called? Spark Double. Enters the battlefield as a copy of a creature except with a +1/+1 counter on it. Yeah, we could go infinite mill. That may be what we're doing. Unless, of course, the Kelpie gets shot. If the Kelpie gets shot, we'd have to Volrath. Discovery. Surveil 2, then draw a card. Ambitions cost. Draw 3 cards, lose 3 life. Yep. Opponent up to 10 cards in hand. Reckless Rage is back. Okay. I think we just let it take the Kelpie down. I don't feel like we need to self-mill anymore. That does slow us down, actually, so maybe... Because it would take 8 mana to Volrath and recast Kelpie, which means that, let's see, we would have to, can we still combo? We have 13 total mana left, 14 on our turn. It would take 8 to get the Kelpie back, 9 for the Vampiric Tutor, 4 more for a Spark Double, I think? Yeah, okay, so I think we would have enough. Here comes Tamiyo the Moon Sage. Yup. Oloro does have a Rhystic Study in play, so they're getting all the card draw now. But luckily they're tapped out, so I don't think they're going to have too much control left. Opponent's going to tap down the Feather. Yep. Grateful Apparition. Deals damage to a player or planeswalker. Proliferate. Okay. Okay. Rhystic Study will trigger. Opponent's going to swing at the Feather. Sure. Here comes another Reckless Rage. Gonna shoot the Grateful Apparition. Got a bunch of triggers going off. Primal Amulet, Rhystic Study, and Feather. And here comes a Hindering Light. Counter target spell that targets you or a permanent you control. There's one you don't see enough of. Draw a card. Yeah, it's a pretty good card. And opponent's not paying any attention to us right now. If our sack outlet survives, that's probably going to be a good game, I think. Opponent does have a little bit of open mana left. Looks like they're probably just holding up for the Core Haven. Don't know that there's counterspell mana in there. So, on our upkeep, we're going to use Volrath Stronghold, get the River Kelpie. So, we draw the River Kelpie, play the land, play the River Kelpie. Rhystic Study will trigger. River Kelpie into play. Use the altar, not going to mill ourselves. We'll mill Chaotix, sacrifice the River Kelpie. It'll get a Persist trigger. We get to draw a card. Play the Vampiric Tutor. Rhystic Study will trigger again. Opponent's gonna Sheltering Light and give Feather indestructible. Sure. Lots of triggers on the stack. Got a Rhystic Study, Primal Amulet, Feather, Sheltering Light, Rhystic Study, Vampiric Tutor, River Kelpie, Altar of Dementia. Feather's gonna Expedite, adding even more stuff to the stack. And there's 2 Expedites, actually, because Primal Amulet is now the Primal Wellspring. So, Indestructible and Scry. Vampiric Tutor, get the Spark Double. Draw the Spark Double. Chaotix gets milled. Cast the Spark Double. And I guess we'll pay 1 for the Rhystic Study right here, just to make sure there's no counter spells or anything like that. Do our best to try to avoid them. Come in as a copy of the River Kelpie. And we've got ourselves a River Kelpie. So, Altar of Dementia on Chaotix. Sacrifice the Spark Double. Start auto-yielding these triggers. Save the targets. Always yield. Choose the River Kelpie. We also get to draw our entire deck right here, too. So, we draw 2 cards. Chaotix scoops it. Sacrifice the River Kelpie. It comes back, copy it, draw more cards. Next opponent scoops. We could actually draw from an empty library before we milled out all 3 opponents. That's a thing that's theoretically possible. So that's a thing to think about if you are running this combo. Now, most of the time people probably just scoop in response, but if they make you play it out, you may actually not get where you want to. Assuming that you have no additional lands. If you have other mana up to do stuff, then obviously you can do other things too, but... Yeah, so we only have 14 cards left in library right now. Like, there's a chance that if all 3 opponents stayed in the game, we could have milled ourselves. We could have drawn from an empty library before we actually killed everyone. So that is a thing to be careful of, particularly with River Kelpie. If you have some of the other creatures, it's probably not an issue. But with River Kelpie specifically, that could be a problem. So opponent's down to 0 cards in hand. We need to discard, like, many cards from our hand. I'm not even looking. I'm just clicking furiously. And pass the turn. Opponent's on their upkeep. About to draw from an empty library. Gonna Expedite. Alright, gonna draw themselves, I guess. And down they go! So, the combo getting us there. Pretty sweet deck. Really like this deck. Lots of cool interactions. Pretty far outside my comfort zone. Grixis +1/+1 counters. Not a thing that I play so often. So let's take a look at this deck. And once again, this deck list did come from Michael Gordon. As I said, longtime supporter of the channel, so Thank you, Michael. But taking a look at the deck, 36 lands, pretty good. Wouldn't hurt to go to 37. I would not be opposed to switching out a Signet for a land, just to make sure you hit those land drops. I found it a little bit tough to get to those later land drops. Like, we got through the first 4 or 5 pretty good, and then I think we kind of got stuck around maybe 5, 6, or 7. And there are 7 drops in the deck, so you are going to want to hardcast these some amount of the time. So that is a thing to think about. The other way you can kind of handle that too is maybe just a touch more card draw. Something as simple as like a Read the Bones. There's a Ristic Study in here, but just some kind of like instant card draw. Because you have so many signets, like an Ambitions cost, something like that would not be the worst idea either. Definitely down for that style of card draw. You could safely add a 4-drop or 2 to this deck, especially with as many signets and talismans are in the deck. So I would probably look at doing that. I thought the Deathrender interaction was super sweet. Really like that. Maybe wants the creature count just a touch higher if you're going to be doing a lot of Deathrendery things, but even getting one good creature with Deathrender is still really, really good. So definitely like the Deathrender thing. There's a Marchesa in the deck. If you want to add more firepower, you can think about adding Triskelion also and adding that combo into the deck. But if you don't feel like your meta warrants that extra firepower, then it's completely fine to leave that as it is. The one card that I noticed that I wasn't caring for was this Clone Shell. Again, 21 creature count deck, kind of low for this type of effect. Maybe it's a pet card, and I totally get it if it's just a pet card and it's fun. Or if there's some other interaction that I'm not missing, because, you know, some of these things are pretty far outside my comfort zone. But Clone Shell really wasn't doing much for me. I'd probably cut that one, add something else, maybe one of those card draw cards we talked about. The Blade of Selves was really cool, but again, it's a lower creature count deck. There aren't like tons and tons of things to use on it, just that the things you have are very high quality. You got a Sphinx for some card draw, the Butcher is sweet, not really an ETB. You got Runescar Demons, good ETB, Meteor Golem was fantastic for us. Flayer's very interesting, actually. Potentially, if you have some instant speed stuff, you get really wild with the Flayer. And the Blade of Selves. But yeah, so not tons and tons of things to do with the Blade of Selves, but the ones that are there are very high quality. You are playing Grixis. I mean, I love Grave Titan. Grave Titan is a card that I just, like, can't bring myself to run without, so I'd probably add a Grave Titan, especially if you're doing kind of an ETB, Recursion, Blade of Selves sort of thing. Beyond the fact that it's just powerful, it's just a card that I like a lot, so I personally would probably add a Grave Titan in the deck. So one thing I'm seeing is I'm not seeing very many traditional board wipes. I would probably start by adding a Blasphemous Act. I personally would probably want to get to at least 4 board wipes in the deck, just to feel kind of safe. Living Death is sort of like a half a board wipe because it kind of depends on what's going on the board and in opponents' graveyards. And it's also going to be meta dependent. If you're just not playing in a meta where there's lots and lots of creatures running around, sure, you're not going to need a lot of board wipes. But even in the more combo-y style of metas, I find that if someone shows up with a green deck, you probably want a board wipe. It's probably a good idea to have a Blasphemous Act. So that is a thing to think about. Like I said, I really like to have about 4 board wipes in the deck, but again, it's also going to be a little bit meta-dependent right there. But you know, if you're not running into a ton of green, you probably don't need them, but if you are, I would definitely add some extra board wipes to the deck. And the other thing to think about too is that your commander has built-in board wipe protection for all of your creatures, essentially. So wiping the board when all of your stuff has Dethrone and +1/+1 counters, no real loss for you. It's going to be pretty one-sided. So I personally would up the board wipe count in this thing just a little bit. Not exactly sure what I would take out. I know we talked about the Clone Shell a little bit. There's probably some other things we can cut somewhere else. But I'd have to really dig into this deck to figure those out. I noticed you are a bit weak to just like artifacts and enchantments, but enchantments are always going to be true of Grixis. You're just always going to be weak to enchantments. You have the All is Dust, which is pretty good. Normally, I would say if you can afford an Ugin, put an Ugin in here, but Ugin's actively bad for what Marchesa does because it itself uses the graveyard, so you probably don't want Ugin. Maybe an Oblivion Stone, maybe a Nev Disc if enchantments are really a problem that you're running into a lot of. But I would probably add like a Vandal Blast or a Bifrost or Meltdown or something like that. Well, maybe not Meltdown. We got a lot of signets, but probably a Vandal Blast I would add to this deck, just because if opponents generate a lot of ramp, you're going to want a way to be able to deal with that, as well as other problematic artifacts. And given that this deck is fairly strong, I imagine that at least some of the time, or at least in years past, this deck probably would have run into a Breya deck at some point, and Vandal Blast pretty good against Breya. Not the complete silver bullet, but, you know, at least slows them down for a couple turns. Keeps them from comboing off. So yeah, I'd probably look at just a bit more removal, stuff like that. A card to think about, you do have a pretty high artifact count in the deck. Let me look it up. So counting artifacts that are not creatures, there are 21 artifacts in the deck. pretty decent, pretty decent. A card you could think about, actually two cards you could think about. Bola Citadel is really good card advantage just all of the time. And the other one is Mystic Forge. Mystic Forge, maybe you're just a touch light for the artifact count on Mystic Forge, but it's still a really cool card. Even if you're able to just get an extra card or two each turn, that's still really, really big. So, and plus you can kind of filter the top of your library a little bit. If you're not looking for lands or you got something that you just don't need on top, you can get rid of it. So something to think about. Maybe not the best option. Maybe you're just better off with, like I said, ambitions, cost, stuff like that, just straight card draw. But certainly some options you can look at for some additional card advantage. Otherwise, I think for what this deck is trying to do, I think it's in pretty good shape. So the curve for this deck is 3.62, which I would call probably just a touch under average, or at least for decks that I build. I tend to build decks that are right around 4 with the converted mana cost, especially if you're in like a slower, more mid-power kind of meta. But you got about a 3.5 curve in this deck. I think it's distributed pretty well with a ton of ramp and a ton of things to do at 2 mana. And then you have a decent handful of things at 5, 6, and 7 mana. I like to have some punch in the top end of my decks. I do like to have some 7 drops in there. You got one 8 drop in this Bearer of Heaven. So I do like to have some power up there in the 7s and 8s, just to have something in case the game goes long. We saw a 12-turn game right there, so game went pretty long. Other than that, I think all the interactions in the deck are really good. Like, I like a lot of these cards. If it came to cutting cards, I don't know what you would cut, because just a lot of these things are really good and interact really favorably with Marchesa and a lot of the stuff going on in the deck, so that's all very cool. But yeah, really, really like the deck. I thought it was a ton of fun to play. I love the Deathrender interaction. That was so much fun. Deathrender was a pet card of mine back in the day, and maybe we need to build a Deathrender deck. Maybe that's a thing that needs to happen, so if I ever get free time again, maybe there'll be a Deathrender deck on this channel. We will see. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, feel free to comment, like, or subscribe. Thank you for watching.